There are betrayals in history so deep, they echo through time, not because of what was lost, but because of who committed them. In the tales of the Crusades, we hear of heroes and villains, of noble knights crossing continents to defend the Holy Land, of kings and popes, of martyrs and miracles. But there is a name whispered in the shadows of those chronicles, a name that does not fit into glory or honor, a man who wore the cross of Christ and then turned it against those he marched with, a crusader who didn't just betray his comrades, he betrayed Christendom itself. This is the forgotten story of renegade Prince Stephen of Blois, a nobleman whose actions may have doomed thousands and changed the course of the First Crusade forever. He was not a common soldier. Stephen of Blois was the Count of Blois and Chartres, married to Adela, the daughter of William the Conqueror. He had wealth, power, and the respect of the Frankish nobility. When Pope Urban II called for the liberation of Jerusalem, Stephen answered with enthusiasm. He assembled a massive army and joined the Crusade in 1096, marching with the highest lords of Christendom, including Raymond of Toulouse and Bohemond of Taranto. He was among the leaders at the siege of Antioch in 1097. The city was heavily fortified and fiercely defended. For 8 grueling months, the Crusaders starved, froze, and died by the thousands. The situation was hopeless, and Stephen had seen enough. In June of 1098, just days before the Crusaders miraculously captured Antioch, Stephen deserted. Not in the dead of night like a thief. No, he rode openly, retreating from the front lines with his entire contingent. His excuse? The cause was lost. God had forsaken them. The Muslim armies were too strong. There was no victory to be found here, only death. But it wasn't just his retreat that caused outrage. It was what he did next. On his way back through the Byzantine territories, Stephen stopped at Constantinople, the seat of Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, whose alliance had been fragile from the start. The emperor had promised aid to the Crusaders, supplies, reinforcements, but trust between East and West was thin. And when Stephen arrived in Constantinople, exhausted and bitter, he told Alexios one thing: the crusade is over. Antioch has fallen. The Crusaders are dead. Turn back. It was a lie. Antioch had not fallen. In fact, the Crusaders had just taken the city days after Stephen fled. But Alexios believed him. The emperor, acting on Stephen's false report, refused to send reinforcements to the Crusaders. The consequences were catastrophic. Outnumbered and surrounded by a massive Muslim counterattack, the Crusaders inside Antioch, believing help would come, were left alone. They suffered unimaginable losses. Thousands perished. Some historians believe that Stephen's lie, his betrayal, nearly destroyed the First Crusade before it ever reached Jerusalem. And yet, Stephen returned to France not as a traitor, but as a broken man. He confessed to his wife, Adela, who was furious and ashamed. She accused him of cowardice, of dishonor, and in one of the most shocking reversals in Crusader history, she forced him to return to the Holy Land. Not for redemption, for obligation. Stephen rejoined the Crusade in 1101. But the world had changed. The Crusaders no longer trusted him. His name was tainted. He was no longer treated as a leader, but a liability. Though he tried to redeem himself, he was marked by fear, by guilt, and by the blood of those he had abandoned. In 1102, during the Second Battle of Ramla, Stephen's final chapter was written in steel and fire. The Egyptian army descended upon the Crusaders with overwhelming force. King Baldwin I of Jerusalem begged for every available man, and Stephen, perhaps seeking absolution, rode to war. But fate had other plans. The Crusaders were slaughtered. Stephen of Blois fought to the end. Surrounded, bleeding, and overwhelmed, he was captured and beheaded. No relics were recovered. No grand memorials raised. His legacy was not of victory, but of betrayal. Some chroniclers softened the tale. They say he repented, that he died bravely, that he found peace in the end. But others, the ones who looked deeper, said he never stopped hearing the cries of Antioch, that the faces of the dead visited him in dreams, that his soul, long before the sword found his throat, was already damned. Because betrayal in war is not just about sides. It's about trust. And when a man breaks trust, not just with comrades, but with God, there is no battlefield large enough to escape the judgment that follows. Stephen of Blois is rarely mentioned in Crusader epics. His name erased from glory, his story replaced by louder, cleaner legends. But what if his tale is the one we should remember most? Not for the betrayal itself, but for what it reveals. That even among the so-called righteous, cowardice festers. That faith can be worn like armor, but stripped away in fear. That betrayal does not always wear the face of the enemy. Sometimes it wears a cross. And that in every holy war, there are men who do not fall by sword or arrow, but by their own choices. This was the Crusader who betrayed Christendom. And now you know the price of one man's retreat. When the world was watching,